Good afternoon, Turks and Caicos, and welcome to another installation of Genfo, the program brought to you by the Department of Gender Affairs within the Ministry of Home Affairs. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday evening. We continue with Men's Health Month, legacy concerns, thriving in body, mind, and purpose. As we discuss many things around men's health, one of the important elements that we explored within this month is health as a legacy concern. What do we pass on? How do we pass it on from men of one generation to another? This afternoon I am joined by two goodly gentlemen who I will ask to introduce themselves because their portfolios are rather expansive and I don't think that I would do justice in introducing them myself. So, gentlemen, welcome to Genfo.
Thank you.
Andy and what's your name? Benson,
Yes.
you know, I gotta give you some ring.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
All right, so gentlemen, please introduce yourselves and your portfolios as we get into the
I'll let
discussion.
the better looking guy go first.
Oh,
Okay, I mean, I can't deny that, so. So, my name is Benson Williams. I am a public speaker, film director, and founder and a lot of different things for a Dip Film Festival. And if you've seen my face anywhere, that's probably one of those things. That's what I was involved in.
okay, all right. Andy.
My name is Andy Bridge Mohan Singh. I don't suggest you try the last name. Andy's adequate enough. I'm the Director of Emergency Medical Services here for the Ministry of Health. What that means in English, I'm in charge of the ambulance service.
Okay,
Yes.
fair enough, fair enough. So I've asked you to join me because you would be coming from two different perspectives as it relates to men's health and what we pass on, good? And how we pass it on. Andy, you are in the medical response business. What
yes.
are some of the more common things that you've had to respond to in the TCI as it relates to men's health? Cardiac issues, accidents,
Yeah.
what does that look like? What are some of the more prevalent things?
TCI, no different really from other Caribbean brothers and sisters because we're also very similar culturally. As much as we're different, we're the same, really and truly. And in TCI, just like everywhere else, we do get a lot of, us men, we're very stubborn at times, so we tend not to take care of ourselves in some ways. We go until we quote unquote crash, meaning, from a dietary perspective or even a rest perspective sometimes. This conversation can go wide because, from a societal point of view or maybe generational, cultural of what expected of men or the Caribbean man, so to speak. And so men, we notice from taking a medication point of view, or having undiagnosed hypertension, undiagnosed diabetes, because men are just going, and they're not really thinking about their health, or they might ignore little warning signs. And maybe their spouse or family member or friend might say, why do you go to the doctor? Nah. Next week.
Doctor.
Next week. Next week never comes, etc. And they go, and then we crash. So we do see a lot of communicable, non-communicable diseases, hypertension, diabetes. On the accident side, we do see a lot of those, unfortunately. A lot of it is correlated to drinking and driving. That's sad. Also, I don't have data to support this, but going on what I'm seeing in my observations, cell phone use is another awful thing I've noticed here in the TCI. And we've progressed to video calling. Long ago we used to take the phone out and call the phone, but now where drivers are doing this. We've seen a lot of those incidents, sadly. But we respond to quite a bit of the medical side of things just because of, hey, maybe guys ignoring certain medical issues until it just catches up with them.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair. Benson, you're a young man.
How come I didn't get that?
Andy, you're carrying the same kind of silverware as I. That's why you didn't get that. Okay?
All right, fair enough.
That's why.
I'll take that.
Among your peer group or your age cohort, all right, is, a discussion around things medical or health, seeking behaviors, getting a checkup. Is that something that frequently happens, or does it just hit the what I call the age of the superhuman?
I see. Well, to speak for my age group, I think it's more what's understood don't need to be said. You know, everything gotta kind of you just gotta be cool about it, right? Now, for my specific circle, I would say, oh, I gotta go to the hospital, I gotta check this out, whatever. And my circle, my peer group would say, oh, okay, right?
Yeah.
However, that is not frequent. That is not even often, which is probably why the reaction would be, oh, okay, if you telling me about this, it must be serious. But if this is something that we're gonna have to talk about and like, you know, have the heart to heart and all that, then no, that for sure is not. It's just not going to happen. Not necessarily to say that they would shy away from it, but it's just not a regular thing. You know, we just honestly don't talk about it. It's just not a part of that conversational piece. You know, and there's never a right time to bring it up. So we just, unless it's like, all right, tomorrow I got this appointment, or maybe I need you to drive me because they say I can't drive myself, something like that, where it has to be like so dire that I have to tell you, then because it's so dire and I have to tell you, your response has to be, okay. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you kind of have to push it to where this is the only way to respond to that. That's, I would say, my age group right now. That's where we at.
Interesting.
What's concerning? You can tell me what's concerning about that, because
a lot of things. But I mean, if you look at the average group of guys who talk to each other, right? Say we run into each other on the road. Hey Benson, what's going on? Do I really want to hear the answer, or is it something we just say? It's something we say, like, hey, what's up? Hey, what's going on? You know, but I'm not really listening for what you're saying, and you're not really even telling me what I'm asking, right?
Precisely.
It's just something we say, you know. But you're not gonna expect me to say, man, I feel like killing myself. That's gonna throw somebody for a curveball. But we don't really do that, like to really interact. Guys just say, what's up? Superficial. That's it. You know. So I find what you're saying is so true. It's rare that you get to that depth. You know, it stays kind of superficial at times. But do we really dig or find out what's going on? You know?
So let me add and let me ask even deeper. We've gotten to a place, and I've noticed it over time, where we seldom ask how you are, you know.
Yeah.
We ask, you good?
Yeah.
Good?
Yeah.
More like a yes or no.
So we put in, you good? We're not waiting for a yes or no. In a lot of cases in communication with men, and this is across multiple islands.
Yeah.
So in some spaces it's, yeah, I good. Some places it's, yeah, man, you know. In some places it's, yeah, everything just right.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? This particular place says, yeah, right here.
Right here. Yeah. Right here. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Right.
It's as if you're right. There isn't this desire to really know how you're doing. It's just a greeting, you know. And the expected answer is, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Do we want to find out what's happening? Do we want to hear the real? Are we comfortable? Are we comfortable with that conversation?
But I would add to that, right? Maybe, I don't know if it's a generational thing or maybe just the people that I know. But if I ask you a specific question, I feel like that is almost like a call to your manhood. So if I ask you, how's, let's say you have a girlfriend, and I say, how's, I don't know, let's say her name is Sheila. How's Sheila? I heard X, Y, and Z. Now you have to tell me.
Yeah.
If you can't tell me, that means something is going on with you and Sheila. Now we got to talk about that.
Yeah.
Right? Because we can't just act like, I don't know, I ain't talked to Sheila in a while.
Yeah.
And then I'm just going to move. No, we got to talk about
It's
that.
a call to have that conversation.
Right. So it's like, if I pull that part, then we'll talk about something deeper.
Right.
But if I never ask that question, you ain't gonna bring it up. We just can keep everything
Right.
on a surface, on a level, on just right there. You know what I mean? So from the other perspective, I think. So I'll talk about myself. If my friend, my boy, don't say specifically, "How's your health?" I'm not gonna tell him about my health, right? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't want to know about my health. Anybody asks, anybody trying to hear all that?
Yeah.
So unless you ask, I'm going to assume you ain't trying to hear all that. This is something that I wanted to put into the conversation.
I'm glad you put it in.
Yeah.
Because now I want to ask, is that idea of not wanting to be a burden a part of how men communicate things? Is it a part of the assumption that ain't nobody trying to hear what's going on with me, so I'm not going to say anything?
I think maybe partially a burden, but also partially I think men generally think that people don't care. It's not, it's not given the attention that it might require, or maybe how we were growing up, and I guess I could boldly say it was somewhat toxic in a sense, and maybe it's a Caribbean culture thing. Maybe not just in Caribbean actually, but you're growing up in a sense of a homie, men don't cry, hey, what you doing? What you doing? Man up.
That
Man
phrase, that phrase,
Put
right
big
there.
boy pants on and whatever. And so indoctrinated into that, so to speak, that maybe we're just enculturated into, it's not something we talk about. It's not something we get into. It's not cool. It's not whatever you want to call it. Just not something that's done. And then flip side, and I've encountered this myself. Like somebody might ask me how I go, and I really tell them, and then they're like, "Hey,
Get that? I didn't come here for all this.
hey, ease me up. Ease me up, bro. They didn't want to hear it. So I'm like, well, why are you asking me? You ask me my business for, don't ask me nothing. But you ask me. I encountered that several times, and purposely I do it. I'd say, yeah, well, I feel really depressed. I was like, hey, I stressed out. I whatever. And they're like, oh, you always so negative and blah, blah. No, it's not that, but you ask me how am I going. I'll be honest with you. Then don't ask me. And then it goes to the other extreme, right? Well, all right, I'm just going to say everything's all right.
Yeah.
But nothing's all right. And a lot of us out here saying everything good, why right here, but ain't right here.
Ain't right here.
No.
You're somewhere. You're
Yeah.
somewhere in there. There are
Yeah.
several things happening.
Correct.
Yeah. Is that something that, how old is that particular thing? Because we have had to get it from somewhere. Good. Is there a difference in that conversation or in that feeling or in that thought across generations? Right? I mean, there's a conversation happening that says that younger men are doing a lot more talking. I have my own thoughts on it, and that, okay, you're talking, but what are you saying? Are you having an in-depth expression of how you are feeling and what you are
Yeah.
experiencing?
Yeah.
Or is it just another panel of what I call shop talk?
Yeah.
It's like you are experiencing grief.
Yes.
Oh, people, when you're grieving, hey, how you doing? What do they expect to hear?
Yes. Oh yeah, that's the most irritating thing, I can tell you that.
You good? How you doing?
I've experienced that myself. Yeah.
So what is that, give me your thoughts. I mean, you guys and myself represent different eras of experiencing manhood and masculinity. Good?
I would say, okay, so my grandfather, my father's father, was not an emotional guy. Now, there's two definitions to that. There is the dramatic, everything is either really, really just angry, or the other definition is, well, you only see him crying and all that extra stuff, right? Both of these definitions are, I would say, valid. However, what I mean is the crying one. And so because of that, especially as men, whenever a situation arises where we can't cry, we're going to default to the one acceptable emotion, right? Because that's the only one where we seem to be allowed to feel, right? So that's my grandfather's era. My father's era now is almost the reverse of that, where instead of going to anger immediately, they would specifically say why whatever it is that's happening is causing them to be angry before they get angry, right? So the anger is still there, you know, we ain't get rid of that.
Right.
But they had more talk, as we would say. They were able to explain and kind of draw out exactly, all right, you see this right here? You see when you do this? You see when you look at me like that? And you wouldn't get those kind of things from my grandfather and his siblings. You wouldn't get that. You know, you only can feel it. Yeah, that's that, right? And then now my generation is more so, I would say, if we're looking at like a Venn diagram or a third part, a triple track to this whole thing, where I don't know if it's intentional, but we actively choose neither of those. And I think the result is to not talk at all about whatever it is. Unless it's something so extreme where it's like, if I don't fight back, then this person is probably going to kill me, right? If I don't get there, I can stay quiet about it. Because it's like, or if I don't stay quiet about it, or should I say, if I don't just stay quiet about it, I'm going to leave the situation. So what we also realize is that there's so many of us in my generation that's just single and happily single because they feel like the opposite of singleness is me constantly fighting battles everywhere I go and not being able to talk about it. Now, I ain't like I want to talk about it, you know, but I rather not talk about it because I'm single versus talking about it because I feel like I can't talk about it. And so we're talking about it.
I get you.
What a dimension. What a dimension. That is very interesting. In your field of endeavor, you would have encountered people treating with different ailments and responses. When you've, let's say you've responded to how many calls to say, look, this gentleman is XYZ. What are some of the different elements of that person's, not just behavior, but their response to that situation?
How much time do we have?
We got time. Go for it.
That's a lot to explain. I'll try to be concise. That's a big one. I've seen a lot of things in my 17-year EMS career. Like some things don't really want to relive. Seen some bad things, you name it. Where I come from in Trinidad and Tobago, EMS is incredibly busy, like 10,000 times TCI, and it's high trauma calls and it's bad stuff. But it's very dynamic what it does to your head. Because I know, like, I have PTSD to a point, and it's somebody who's my girlfriend at the time, she's the one who pointed it out to me that I was having some behavioral challenges. Because I was like, I was the calmest dude, still kind of calm, but not as calm. But when I first entered the field, I was very calm, wouldn't hurt a fly. But she saw changes in me over time. But thankfully, someone was able to point it out to me, and I was able to, start getting help and treat that, But it's in those random moments. I can remember one specific time we were at the beach, me and the group of guys I would hang out with, and we were in the water, and it turned into a big sharing session, and it was kind of cool and interesting. At the same time, where a bunch of dudes were in the water, just sharing trauma, bad trauma. I talking about, I'm talking about bad trauma, and it was coming out for some guys, and I was like, whoa, this is supposed to be a hangout, people drinking beers, chilling, some people having a good time, and it turned into therapy, but it was healthy. But it was the first time it happened, and it happened repeatedly after that, mind you, many other occasions. But that was the first time that I stood out in my head. And you heard really the cries of how people dealt with what they saw, what they experienced in the ambulance service, of the trauma they've seen, the sadness they've encountered, blah, blah, blah. But it came out there because similar. They don't feel like there's a space to share it because the ability to be vulnerable is really special. And if someone doesn't feel safe enough to be vulnerable, they're going to bottle that up. And sadly, and science and psychology proves this, PTSD manifests in different ways.
It does.
You know, and culturally, the way you're socialized, etc., manifests. You know, certain cultures might manifest in suicide. Certain cultures are going to manifest in domestic violence, alcoholism, etc., etc. But that's what I've seen to sort of tie into what you guys was talking about. It's how it's processed from that vulnerability side of things. So that's this guy, whoever this guy is, doesn't feel vulnerable. He's gonna pack that up, bro, and just stuff it down as much as he can, until one day they're gonna pop out and they're gonna pop off, so to speak, in the wrong way and an unhealthy way, all kind of ways, different ways. But it's all about that vulnerability. So it's like what you said, where you feel like, you know, I might be able to get that out there. I share that sentiment, and I think that's cross-generational, if I could say that. It's about that safe space. Creating that safe space for somebody to vent or to just let it out or just talk, whatever. But if they don't have it, recipe for disaster.
Understandable. Do you find that lack of vulnerability is something that is commonplace across the society of men? And this is to both of you. Yeah? Is that something that is commonplace? Is it that you've encountered in your peer group or across various settings? Because we are versatile beings as humans. We go to work, we go to church, we hang out in community, we party, we do any number of things. But among the community of men, do we find that inability to find a space to be vulnerable is something that is pervasive?
I would say yeah.
Yeah, I would say yes too.
Yeah.
So I'd say, I mean, 100%, yeah.
What are some of the things that you believe contribute to that?
I would say, sorry, this is about to get very sad.
Go for it.
I would say growing up. They say that it's the woman, the children, and the dogs, right? But the children consist of boys and girls. So that would mean at some point when the boy is no longer mommy's little boy, that he becomes everybody's problem. Unless he doesn't become everybody's problem. And the only way, because he ain't really taught this, he's just kind of watching model type behavior. And everybody else went through the same process. So it's like, hey, when you hit 18, you hit 21, you hit 30, you hit 40, whatever age, for whatever society, you say, you know what? It's about time you start doing this by yourself. It's about time you don't complain. It's about time you, and if you feel like,
yeah, I agree.
I don't know how to navigate this, ain't nobody care. And that part is so serious. Stay with me. That part is so serious that it's also a joke. Everyone, this is common knowledge. Everyone knows that men have the highest suicide rates worldwide, globally. But that's a joke. So it's so serious that it's a joke.
It's a meme.
It's a meme.
Yeah.
You look, everybody know about that Michael Jordan meme when he started crying on. He started crying. Tyrese started crying. Will Smith started crying. What happened to them as soon as they started crying?
Memes.
Vine.
It's so serious.
Paul Will Smith is still number one on that meme with the tears.
So it's like, I mean, speaking of Will Smith, imagine, right? Because this is only a man thing. Notice I said man, not boys. This is only a man thing. Imagine your partner or whatever their situation is telling you not only were they not faithful,
entangled.
But they were unfaithful with someone that you know in your house.
Yeah.
And all these cameras on your face. And if you don't react like everything cool, whose fault is it? You ain't even had to say nothing.
Yeah.
So serious?
It's a joke.
That's a joke. Anyway.
Second what he said. That's some deep stuff.
Yeah. I think the continued thing is what he said.
Yeah, what he said, but it's true. It
Yeah.
is true. It's mental health. Men's mental health, sadly, is we talk it. I mean, I'm happy that's being talked. I mean, happy that we're talking. I'm happy that it's a conversation. It's more of a conversation now than it was 5-10 years ago.
Agreed.
Sure.
Agreed.
Great. But to me, I think it's a joke. Because I don't see the seriousness behind it. I don't see the backing. I don't see a lot of support, whether it's financial or policy or what. I don't see it nowhere in the world, really and truly. You know, there needs to be more. There really needs to be more, you know. But, I mean, like mental health group here, they do great. Dr. Alicia Malcolm, she's a real trooper.
Yeah, the
You know what
team
I mean?
there. I'm
Yeah,
familiar with the team at
there's
Behavioral Health Services.
there's some troopers down there, man. They fight hard, you know. But it's a growing fight, and they can't do it alone. You know, that's a national. I mean, I maybe wishful thinking, but it's a national thing, you know. Really, and
But
truly.
that's it. It's
a
not
societal
wishful thinking.
Yeah.
It is a societal issue.
Yeah.
We have some very strange beliefs around mental health to begin with, and then men's mental health.
Yeah.
I recently read someone's post for something that had happened, and she was very traumatized, and she was screaming about it, literally typing all capital letters. And at the end she said, men's mental health, nothing. It's as if we are in this space where if something happens and there's a violent situation, a man hits a woman, the discussion, interestingly enough, becomes about why do we need to pay attention to men's mental health? This thing just happened.
Yeah.
It is a clear sign something is wrong.
Yeah.
But the idea is to know we need to punish these dudes.
Yeah.
And we need to punish all dudes because this dude did something.
Yeah.
Not understanding that, listen, this is indicative of a major problem.
Yeah.
It's gone past being an issue. It's a problem.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They need to up the ante on mental health, especially men's health. I mean, mental health on the whole, you know. But it's like I say, to me, sometimes I think it's a joke that we're not that serious about it. We talk
It's so serious
It's a joke.
that it's a joke.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned PTSD, right? Because that was most common with military personnel, people who came back from war zones and whatnot, which is mostly men.
That's when funny enough, how that happened.
But then the thing is, when it comes to other things, there is let's call it briefing and debriefing. So you gotta say, all right, this is what we're about to get into, and then when we finish, we would say, all right, this is what we just got into.
Right.
This is what ended up happening. This is what worked. This is what didn't work. And if anyone feels like they need to say whatever it is they got to say and talk about it, then let's do that. But that doesn't happen. And so it creates that post-traumatic stress because that was designed to stop that. But if you don't have that, then it comes, right? It's the equivalent to, so obviously I have hair, right? And
Right.
and I
Some shade thrown there. Like,
no.
I'm wondering, but let's go with it.
I'm just saying. So I'm doing my hair, getting my hair done by the hairdresser, and the water was cold. So I said to her, as masculine as I could, I said, "Hey man, you gotta let me know when you about to put that cold water on my hair, because I don't even have water on my hair every day. So that's a shock, right? It's very stressful in the literal sense." And she couldn't understand that because obviously from her perspective, she probably maybe wash her hair once or twice a month or whatever, so she's used to that, right? Take that example and apply it to things like killing people or watching people die or whatever else that men have to go through that women don't necessarily have to go through as much. And even if women do have to go through it, they could talk about it. But we ain't talking about that part. We're taking the same scenario, the same thing. I just told you about me washing my hair, and I don't like when you just give, you got to tell me, brief me. You understand? This is what's about to happen. Right? Same situation. You feel like it's not necessary because you're used to it. But for me, I'm not used to it.
Right.
And if you're used to, you know, when I'm in the UK, obviously I don't know that many people over there. So when I hear of whatever is happening, I don't know them people. But here, there is a really great chance that if and when something traumatic happens, I know that person. Same situation, but now I'm dealing with it differently. And as everyone else, just for people who don't understand, imagine being told, even though you know this person, even though you grew up with this person, or whatever the case may be, you can't say nothing about it because we'll turn that into a joke. Imagine being told that, imagine or receiving that information. However, that is what creates PTSD, and I think that's what men have to go through.
As a regular part of being a man. We started a discussion on something relevant to what you started speaking about, of people losing people, and the fact that violent death is something that's becoming uncomfortably common within the TCI.
Yes.
We have one side of that happening where a young boy, a young man loses his life. So he's got a mom, he's got a dad, he's got some uncles, he's got some nephews, nieces, sisters, cousins, school friends. All of those people would have lost this person. So they feel grief, and this is traumatic. On the other side of it, and this is the part where we were discussing, there's the person who took that person's life. And there's the belief that, you know, maybe they don't think about it, or they don't. No. They do think about it. They also experience the trauma of that. They also go through a process of grief, because more often than not, they probably know that person or knew that person in some context. And that's where the epidemic of violence hits communities like ours in the Caribbean that are really small. You grew up with this dude. You probably went to school with this dude. You know him from somewhere. And the fact that you took his life, that is traumatic. That takes a toll on you. Because one of the things that happens is a two-pronged element called, one, there's survivor's guilt. Because usually that situation means that one of you, both of you got into the scuffle, maybe a couple of you joined, you lived. And you live with the fact that you may have ended this person's life. The second part of it is the untreated trauma and the guilt and the hurt. As men, we're socialized as young boys to hold that pain in, which is unhealthy. Which is what causes a lot of the elements of stress and harm. But as the person who took someone's life, you are held to an even higher standard of stupid hypocrisy. Because you're supposed to be, now you hard, now you're a killer, or you're a shooter, or you're the person or whatever else. You don't get to have the facility to discuss that. I encountered this in a number of countries where I've been working with gangs, and there are people who are within those scenarios who break down and cry because for the first time they are allowed the space to be vulnerable.
Right.
Good? When there's a scenario where someone is wounded, like you're responding to, and you respond to this, if you consistently respond to trauma and traumatic situations, there's something called secondary trauma, where this didn't happen to you, but you had to attend to it. You had to see it. You had to experience it. You probably had to stand and wait while this person or was there, or speak to them, or have some kind of contact with their trauma and with the stimulation of their family members or other members of the society. And one of the things that happens is that we frequently don't attend to caregivers or to people in those settings.
Correct.
And we often say, oh, well, that's your job, so you're going to be okay.
Yep.
Good? And when you respond to it, funny enough, because of the fact that you're in a smaller society, you as a man lost this person, you're more likely to be standing in proximity to this person, or know this person, or see them in a state that is less than healthy. How do we respond to that? What do we need to begin with?
I think you kind of touched on it. Sorry, you want to?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think you kind of touched on it when you mentioned that space. I think words have double meanings for a reason, because there is the mental space, there is the physical space, and then there is the space that I guess encompasses both, where you could actually have a conversation. And side note, when I was in college, I learned the definition of a conversation. And it was like, oh, a conversation is when two people are taking turns talking. And in my head, at first, I was thinking, why do we need a definition? Like, people don't know what conversation is. But I realized a lot of people don't respect the rules of a conversation. So it turns into a lecture or something of that nature, where there's only one person talking. And then at the end of that, you say, yeah, we had a conversation about it. No, we didn't. You spoke. In other words, you didn't give that space in no form. Not through the conversation, not in the physical space. You all up in my face. And mentally, I don't feel, I can't see an outlet for me to actually say, well, actually, because you dominating the conversation, essentially.
You were spoke to.
Yeah.
You were spoken to.
Someone
Right.
spoke to you.
Right. And they call that a conversation, and it's not.
Agreed.
And it's
So you
important
have the
to,
space for sure.
and it's important to have that understanding, because we often get into scenarios where we use the word conversation, but it's as Andy said, you got a good talking to. Good? Because a conversation is an equal space of exchange.
Yeah.
There is no dominance of power in a conversation. There is no person who has a moral right to speak more than the other person. There is no written or unwritten codicil that says, my title is so and so and so. I know more than you. You will listen. And a lot of times that's what happens. In man world, as I call it, a lot of times that's what happens. Good? But it's damaging and dangerous, because there is no dimension of health that is not interconnected. Right? That's why when we spoke of health, we speak of physical, mental, emotional, even the spiritual idea. Because what you believe in plays a large part in how you treat with things.
Yeah.
Because there are people who, there are men who you just fall into the default safe space. And the default safe space usually involves alcohol, get drunk, sports. Because you can cry if your team lost.
Yeah.
You blame it on that.
You
as
can blame it
opposed
on
to-
that.
Right.
You can speak loudly if you get drunk and your team lost. Good? But there is seldom a space where you can do all of that because you need to get it out, because you need to shout, you need to, get the anger past, because the anger is that gate that you've been holding your grief in with. And in that particular space of exchange, you seldom get past the gate. Because we're allowed to be angry, we're allowed to be hostile. Those are the default allowances.
Right.
Good. And in scenarios where, for instance, I have a bit of experience on your side of things, and when you see an accident happen and you respond to that accident, what do you see? Good. You see somebody's angry and expressive and loud, or somebody is like jittery, or somebody's there. The angry, loud, expressive person, when they get past that, usually what happens is they're like, there's shaking, because there are things that happen that touch you at an emotional depth that you may not know what it is. And that's another element of health, especially for men. But women, from the time they're girls, you get to cry. You get to know what the depth of your emotional spectrum is. You know what your face looks like when you cry. You know what this feeling is attached to these things, is attached to this depth, is attached to this physical and physiological response. In a lot of cases, we as men don't get to do that because we don't get to explore that emotional realm. We don't. So if it is that we have to start changing this damaging dynamic of keeping things in, of not seeking help and support, what are some of the things that we would need to encourage? What are some of the things that we need to create? What are some of the behaviors that we need? What do we need to do?
Well, that's not an easy answer.
Don't worry. Take it from whatever side you want.
I don't know if I have all the answers, but
You don't have to have all.
I would just say we really need to be bold about creating that safe space and stop tiptoeing around the issue and accept it for what it is. Create that space for people, men and women, but we don't want men here, but men and women, to have that space. Because women themselves, they would face ridicule in certain sectors, of course, maybe within the family, or maybe from the husband or something like that. But from a mental health point of view, we need to engage this. We need this to be real, need it to be tangible, and people must feel safe to do so. And we really need to dial back that ridicule, because I've known men, I've encountered it myself, whether in past relationships, etc., where you might be expressive and you're ridiculed for it, regardless of. And I know a lot of guys, and like I said, experience it myself, you're dating, this girl or whatever, and you express something and, it's like, oh my God, you should not have said that. Women gonna hate me for this. But they're gonna be like, but in a lot of cases, I've seen where men were encouraged to lie indirectly because you asked the question, gave the answer, and then, you got chastised or whatever for it. So just recently, one of my best friends, he was telling me about a situation with him and his spouse, and about a patient he was seeing, and something happened there, and he was telling about it. He was ridiculed, and then something else similar happened, and he's like, he didn't tell her because last time he got into trouble. So he's like, you know what, I got nothing to say no more. He started dialing it back, and that's just one example. It needs to be consistent, safe space. That vulnerability must be there. From an operational side of things, from a pre-hospital care or even workspace, like some places they encourage mental health days. That should be a thing globally. People got issues, life is stressful, the society now is crazy in a lot of different ways, in ways that we could probably talk about for months and months and months, but it needs to be felt to be, it's okay not to be okay, as they say, but that needs to move from cliche and just something we say, or WhatsApp status, or like for all these different things, everybody gets into these facades. So like for Down syndrome, everybody puts on these socks. And don't get me wrong, I all for that, you know. But is it just a fad for you? You really mean that? Are we really backing up what we're saying, or is this just all we just shooting smoke, bro? You know. So, and from a policy perspective, like in the workplace, shouldn't this be a policy? Shouldn't it be like allowed, like written down that, yeah, this thing is a, you know, safe space, or this is not allowed here, or mental health days, but it needs to be backed by that. And I don't know exactly what I mean when I'm saying this, because I'm not the expert of that area.
But you state very clearly and very
well.
succinctly.
But it needs to be that way. And talking from a first responder point of view, you kind of touched on a bit. You go to one call, trauma. You go to another call, trauma. You go to another call, trauma. You're not allowed to take a break, you know. There's a call pending. You're the ambulance available. You're going. There's no, hey, back up, I can't deal with this right now. Now, sometimes if something happens, I mean, something bad happens, you can call your supervisor and say, listen, like, not too good right now, something's wrong, I can't deal with this. It has the moments where people have done that, but generally, the expectation is you jump on your bus, get going. Especially in certain systems where it's dominated by financial gain. They're private organizations who run ambulance services all over the world. So time is money for them in particular. Time is money. You need to get to that call at a certain time. Don't exceed time on the scene.
Right.
Get to the hospital at a certain and I can tell you where I work, they're very particular about time. You're like, there are certain systems, you stay at your house, let's say I respond to you, you know, God forbid, God forbid, but my boy is having a whatever issue that day, and it's timed. And let's say that the time mark in most places like 20 minutes. At 21 minutes, a supervisor is en route to that scene to find out why you're still with Benson at 21 minutes. They want you gone. So there's that added pressure from the health perspective. If you look at our folks in the hospitals, doctors and nurses, etc., they also don't have that luxury because guess what? They just saw one patient, maybe patient died or whatever, really bad, but there are 50 more outside waiting to be seen and attended to. They're not getting that mental, I need 10 minutes, I need 10 minutes. No, bro. There are 50 more people waiting on your medical care. You know, so it's rough, but it really needs to be something tangible and stop all this smoke, all this old talk. Let's make it real. And society needs to really come to that place where we accept that, yeah, this is real, and not ridicule each other for it. That's why a lot of men hold back, because of that ridicule. Because last time they opened up, you know, they were chastised or ridiculed or made fun of, or became a meme, or something of this sort. A meme, you know, your popular thing now, you become a meme, or something. So why should I? I ain't talking to you. I ain't coming on your show. I ain't doing this. We need to make it real, and it needs to be, like I said, from a policy perspective. Let's make that law, make that something. We had to take those harsh steps to change that, because generations come and go, and you know, we need to let them know that it's okay. We sadly were victims of some things, and if it is we allow them to be the same victim, we ain't no better than the, you know, aggressor in certain situations. You know, we need to foster that change. I mean, having this conversation is awesome, you know, but which is part of change. Having conversations. That's where all good things come from. Once you're communicated, things can happen. But we need to now start stepping up. All right, we're talking. How long are we gonna talk for? I want to see some action behind this stuff. You know, yeah, we having these forums, and don't get me wrong, I think they're awesome. They're great.
We need more.
I want action points, though. You need to. It's like you're going to a meeting and everybody talks about something, but there's no action point. What's the action point? What are we going to do? Where are we going to break that wall? Where, you know? And I'm not saying to fix it overnight. It can't. That's impossible. But we need to start taking those tangible steps to making mental health really something that's paid attention to and not just ignored and ridiculed all the time. For real, for real.
What do we add? Benson, what do you want to add?
I would double down. By the way, I think everything you just said, I 100% co-sign.
Cool.
I agree with you. I think yes, we want to be able to keep talking about it, but we also need action. And I think when I say gentlemen's club, a lot of people know.
Right.
A lot of people know what that is.
Right.
And I will go on to even say that the one thing that we didn't need to add to a gentleman's club is the one thing that caused us to stay. Where so if we look at how quicksand works or something along those lines, I don't know. So I can't think of anything else that's not more traumatic than quicksand. But the more you fight, the faster you sink.
Right.
And so when you parlay with the problem that you're running from, the problem does not get solved.
Yeah.
So if and when you decide to have a gentleman's club, and there are more than gentlemen there,
Right.
you cannot expect gentlemen to come out of that club. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get where you're going.
Right?
Where you're going.
Okay.
All right.
So, when I say space, because I wanted to double down on space, when I say space, I mean a space for gentlemen.
Right. Okay.
Right?
I follow you.
Got it.
I follow you.
Right.
Yeah.
I believe this is something that the YMCA tried. There were different organizations around the world, and not to say that they failed, but I would say that the commonality of the issue of why things are not going as smoothly as we would like is because when you parlay with the problem you're trying to solve, the problem does not get solved.
Okay. Follow you.
Right.
I get
Okay.
you.
There we go.
Focus.
Yeah. Strategic focus. Yes,
It's
yes.
important.
Yeah.
One of the challenges that we observed with passing on good health-seeking behaviors for men is that there isn't a concerted effort to communicate solutions to those problems
Yeah.
in a manner that men would understand. So before we got live on set, we were talking about prostate health and checking the prostate.
Yeah.
And, you know, and Benson asked can I use that material? You know, like, he asked, okay, so can you blame guys, are they right or wrong for their attitude towards getting examined for your prostate? And I said, no, I can't blame them. Good. And it is not simply a matter of their stance being a right or wrong one. You have your reason for it. Good. I am certain, and I'll, you know, as I said then, I'm certain that no one sat and spoke and listened to the issues that those men would have had around prostate cancer and checking your prostate. And what I'll add is, because there has not been that large-scale effort to make men's health issues comfortable topics,
Yeah.
in the same way that they've done for women's health issues, there are things that have not been discussed. So, for instance, and I said this on an earlier program where we were talking about men's health, the DRI, the digital rectal examination, is
DRE,
not the only way that you check for your prostate. You can do a blood test to check for PSA levels. There's a retinal exam. Good. There's a CAT scan. There are other means and methods that you can utilize to check your prostate. The fact is, at a particular age, it's important to do a prostate exam.
Yep.
You have options. Yes? The options are available here because I've checked. You have all the medical technology Because it's also, because those examinations, those are part of doing other things. Checking PSA levels is also a part of other things. Good? Doing the retinal scan, because the retina shows signs once there's a drop in particular hormone levels. There is a change in the retina, so it can indicate, because medicine is systemic. Good? You have one issue, it can be an indicator that you've got something else. Good? So that conversations like that and direct communications like that are an important part of moving this particular issue of men's health and mental health seeking behavior. Good? Added to which, we need that communal safe space. And that safe space isn't just a physical space, but it's also a mental emotional space, because conversations around men's health need to move from the standpoint where it's a joke.
Yeah.
Good?
Yes. Agreed.
Because it's serious, and it's serious enough to become a joke, because we tell jokes to deal with the discomfort.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to check your prostate. Ha 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 ha. I know what happened to you.
Yeah.
And it's laughed at.
Yeah.
You know, even like cardiac health. It is pervasive. Diabetes type 2 and all of the ravaging effects of it. We acquire those conditions and issues together.
Yeah.
We do all those things. The things that are part of defining manhood are downright damaging for men. Good? Excessive alcohol consumption. Oh, you could drink, you could hold your liquor. It's going to damage you.
Yeah.
Good?
Yeah.
Eating particular things excessively is going to do damage. And we do that in groups. But then when we end up with the challenge, we have to face it alone.
Yeah.
So as part of that, I think creating that mental emotional space, that conversation space where don't just come to talk at us. You know, you gotta listen to, because there are some deep-seated fears and concerns.
Big time.
Good? We are in the process of wrapping today's broadcast, gentlemen, as we talk about men's health as a legacy concern, you know, healthy minds, healthy bodies, healthy engagement. Is there a closing message that you would like to share with the community?
Anything you want to leave them with?
Man.
I would say, there's so much to say, but I would say be bold, be brave. Try to, what should I say, try to not avoid, but resist the fear of ridicule. Find yourself a physician, if that's the case, a doctor, whoever, and it's a good practice to have a family doctor, by the way, like, you know, because if you go to into health down the road, you see one doctor today, you go back next week, you might see another one, because that other doctor you saw is off shift. Or different, you go to primary health care, you go here, you go there. A lot of people doctor hop sometimes, but it's good to have that follow-up. And I definitely recommend it. Get yourself a good doc. Make that your family doc, if I can call it that, or your doc, so that that person is, you know, you build a relationship and a history, and that person knows what's going on with you. You know, they do the follow-up, they got all the information, they could guide you. And then, because if you hop now, you go to another person, they have to start all over, you know. So I would say break the Caribbean cultural mold. Get a family physician, if we could call it that. Find that person, but also engage in meaningful conversation. Find that person or persons, have meaningful conversations, because you might have stuff going on with you that, you know, you just don't realize. But sometimes that outsider's point of view might help point it out, but they have to be open to it. You got to be brave enough to change, because sometimes we need to change. We the problem.
Agreed.
We the problem. You know, we need to stop drinking, or we need to stop whatever. You know, we the problem. Now we got to be brave enough to do that change. I miss the ridicule. I miss the stuff. You know, it's all. Can't say that word on TV, but it's all mess. It's all mess. And it's a false narrative, and we have to remember, hey, we were lied to, and people are lying to us that it's not safe to do this, or we must be this way, or we must be now. It's a lie, and we need to move away from that and be really true to ourselves, and just be better men, just be better humans.
Got it.
Yeah.
Benson.
I think again, would say
Yeah.
something similar to what my colleague here say. I think also, I've heard this analogy before, so obviously I believe y'all and a lot of our viewers probably heard it as well. So allow me to reiterate, human me. You are your vehicle.
Yeah.
Your vehicle is you.
Mm.
Just as you go to get an oil change, right? When, or if you could remember a time when you had to catch a ride from somebody else,
Right.
and you seen headlights or you seen cars pass cross and all that stuff, and say, oh, I don't think that's that person. Oh, ain't it? You are pointing at vehicles and calling them people. So you're right. That is that person. And when, as men, we get a new vehicle or something, like, oh, that's you? Yeah, that's me.
That's me.
Yeah, that's you.
Yeah.
Just as
True.
you take care of your vehicle, the one that you drive in, you should take care of the vehicle,
The one that
the
you
one
live
that
in.
you live in.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. We've had a fantastic discussion. And thank you, Turks and Caicos community, for joining us and engaging in another episode of Genfo. Coming up, the Department of Gender Affairs will be hosting Love on Me Girls Empowerment sessions across the islands. We will leave the poster with you. And also coming up, heading to North Caicos, Camp Builder Boss for the boys. August, taking care of each other. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Do enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care.